accelerated dragon is a good example of how just a change in move order and a slight variation on the opening can lead to a very different type of a game. It's one of the reasons why you need to know lots of different variations, because if it goes into this different position, what are you trying to achieve now? It seems like it's the same opening, but the game will be entirely different. And the name Accelerated Dragon is kind of misleading, because accelerated makes it sound like somehow maybe it's even more aggressive or attacking. But actually, the Accelerated Dragon often leads to even more positional types of an opening rather than the really sharp exchanges and attacks that we see in the regular dragon. So let's look at some of these differences and what type of position you may expect to get here. So we start out with the same moves, but oftentimes in the last lecture, you guys saw that in the dragon we played d6 here. But in the Sicilian, the oldest classical variations actually play knight to c6. But later on, grandmasters started to play d6 first instead. And so they're both considered to be like classic variations of the Sicilian. And you can usually play either knight to c6 first or d6 first. It slightly changes the move order, but usually leads to a transposition into the exact same opening. So if you see knight to c6 be played by somebody, or if you want to play that instead of d6, it will usually lead to the same thing. But in this case, if we're going to play the accelerated dragon, we usually play knight to c6 first, and then we will hold off on playing this d6 move, because at some point, depending on what white does with their light squared bishop, we might play d5 and strike the center and have a different style of game than in the traditional dragon. So they will usually, again, go ahead and play d4 immediately, and you will trade off that pawn. That's the main theme. And then this major difference between the regular dragon and the accelerated dragon is that we will immediately play g6. We're not going to play this knight to f6 first. We're going to get the bishop fianchettoed immediately. We're going to aim it at this knight, and we're going to mix up the move order and look to potentially go d5 in the center. And if white knows what they're doing, they will put their bishop on c4 to help stop this d5 push. And if they do that, then we will have more of a similar game to what we saw with the regular dragon, and it will kind of transpose into a regular dragon, depending on which side that they castle on. Or if they don't do that, if they put their bishop, for example, on e2, which is a pretty natural place to put the bishop as well, then we're going to look to play d5 and strike the center. So instead of having this kingside attack on both sides like the regular dragon, we're going to have more of a standard struggle for central control, which is usually the goal of an opening in chess. We want to get a strong central position. We'll be fighting for the center. So the accelerated dragon puts you in a position to help to fight for the center more so than the regular dragon, which kind of just gives up the center and aims for these queenside pressure and advantages. So they'll still play the knight out. We'll play our bishop out. And then usually here they'll play this bishop out here to e3 first. Since we haven't played d6 yet, like in the other line, they're usually going to hold off, if they're a good player, on playing this f3 pawn move and then go into the Yugoslav attack. The attack that I showed you guys in the last lecture, where they attack the king side with this setup with the queen bishop here and everything, it's called the Yugoslav attack. I neglected to mention the name of that. And so it's a really common theme, as I said, but it doesn't always make sense depending on how black has set themselves up. So in this case, in the accelerated dragon, both sides are kind of looking to see what your opponent is going to do. And so they're kind of waiting to see. So by putting this bishop here, they set themselves up so they could go into the Yugoslav attack and castle queenside, or they could go castle regular and fight for the center. Again, another alternative is that if they play this bishop out to c4 immediately here, then they're looking to stop this d5 pawn push. So I'll show you a couple different scenarios. So if they go there, we're not going to play d5 right away. We need to get this knight out and everything, but we just accelerate the fianchettoing of this bishop to put pressure on this knight and change the move order, give us a little flexibility. This can also confuse our opponents. If we're playing a blitz game and they're not used to this move order, they might make a mistake and do something wrong, and then we'll get an advantage. So let's say we play this knight out, and let's say they don't bring their bishop out. They just bring their queen out, and they set themselves up like they're going to go maybe into the Yugoslav attack. And now once we castle, let's say they just castle long immediately. Well, now we're in this position where we can theoretically play d5 right away, because we're striking the center, and if they take and we take, then now our bishop's really, really strong right here. And if a big trade-off of pieces happens, we've got a really good position now. Remember, white has the initiative when they start the game. So any initiative that we can get as black or any equalization is good. And so this position looks really good for black. White doesn't have any attack. There's no pawn storm coming here. And this pawn is under threat right now, so they're going to have to move a piece to block it or move the king over. It's usually prudent to move your king over and adjust your king position. So let's say he takes a move to do that. Now we can bring our bishop out if we want to, depending on his knight. We can, let's say we've got 1, 2, 3 pieces attacking this knight. They've got 1, 2, 3 attackers. So we can go for even more of a trade, which would go into a really equal endgame. We probably don't want to do that so quickly. We can start a pawn storm ourselves and start pushing these pawns forward. There's a lot of calculation that would need to go into the game at this point to decide what's the game plan and what do we want to do. But basically, we will have achieved a major portion of what we want in the opening if we can equalize this quickly as black. So if white neglects to play the bishop to c4 and we can play that d5 pawn move, we're putting ourselves into a really good position for a good game. We want to trade off the queens. We can force a queen trade, which also may be advantageous for us. We have these two really good bishops here aimed at the king, and we can have a pawn storm. It's going to be a really close struggle and a really balanced position. And if you can get that with black, that's usually really good. And in chess, usually you'll come to a point after the opening where there will be a lot of calculation needed. You're going to have to spend maybe a lot of time on one move because it's such an important move that will decide the fate of the game, which way the game will go. Another thing you might want to think about doing in this position is just simply moving this rook out and aiming it right here, aiming it across from the queen, and then later on you can move your queen. Maybe you have an attack there. It also serves the dual purpose of avoiding this trade once again, as we saw in the dragon. And all of these variations of the dragon, we want to avoid this bishop trade if we can. Keep this dark squared bishop. It's a powerful piece, especially if the queens come off or some trades happen and you still have your dark squared bishop aimed at their king. It can lead to some good things later on. So we want to keep that bishop. Moving the rook over achieves both of those purposes, and we can now fight for a win in this game. Okay, so the key thing we saw there is that white neglected to play bishop to c4 immediately, and they went ahead and they set up themselves for a Yugoslav attack. But in this case, it doesn't really work so well because we can play this move right here, d5. Okay, so that's a key idea in the accelerated dragon. Now, if they do go ahead and play bishop c4 right away, well, we're not going to play d5 because now they have 3 pieces defending that square. They are controlling that square very well. In this case, what we're going to do is continue just like we would have in the original dragon. So we basically would have transposed into that position. Or, since they haven't played f3 yet, we can also try to annoy them and play knight to g4 and attack this dark squared bishop. We can trade off this knight for their dark squared bishop while keeping our dark squared bishop. It increases the power of this piece because they no longer have an opposing dark squared bishop to challenge us. He can't put his bishop here and try to trade it because our knight's controlling that square. He can try to avoid the trade by moving here or here, but that runs into maybe some more annoying things. We can put this pawn here because we've got a knight and a bishop on it. You'll have to calculate the little tactics or, the complexities of the actual moves in this situation, but that's something that can be very annoying for white, and a lot of players will elect to do that. Also, if he moves this bishop over here and he's not careful, notice that we have this bishop and this knight also attacking this knight. So if he makes a move like this, it's a big mistake because now we can just take this knight right here. It's defended, and we would win a piece. So that can be a nice little tricky thing to do. Okay. Otherwise, we will want to play d6 and transpose back into the regular dragon. So you see this a lot in different various openings. You'll transpose into a different main line depending on the move order, and that's okay. And at this juncture, he'll probably go ahead and play this f3 move, and now we go right back in to the other line that we saw before, and you will have something like this. Okay, and now we're familiar with it, we've seen it, we know what to do. and it's going to be a really fun, interesting game. And we can we can change up our moves, or if we know that these are the strongest moves and we're familiar with the position, it can be a really good idea to simply play these same moves and put some pressure on this knight. This is a common theme, put pressure on this knight. At some point, we can sacrifice the exchange, as I said. Let's just give you an example of that and do this. Take right there, and let's say he really wants to open the position. He's going to move this guy forward. He wants to attack this right here. Well, in some cases, we can immediately take his knight because this knight was defending this square here. Okay, he can't take it with the queen because our rook is defending it. So when we take this knight right here, what happens is he's forced to take it with the pawn. And now we can either go ahead and just win a pawn back, which is not what we want to do because we just sacrificed a rook for a minor piece. Instead of winning this pawn, we want to take advantage of the position. So now it's very dangerous for them. If we can put our bishop here, which we can't do right now because the knight can take it, now we have a big threat here. So if we can get this knight to move somehow, or we can move this knight back, and even though it allows them to push his pawn forward, which is what we didn't want for their attack to succeed, we have an immediate threat. We can take this pawn, so they can't do that. So we can take this pawn, make them move the queen, and now we have a lot of momentum. We have things coming. We can make a check. We can reattack this queen. There's lots of things we can do, and now black has the initiative. White can't do this because that just closes the position. It doesn't get him anything. So the attack's over basically. I mean, it's a sharp opening for both sides. That's why it's so fun to play. Both sides has a lot of chances here. There's a lot of things that we can do. Okay, so it's a really fun opening to play. Oh yeah, this queen's under attack by the knight, so we can't do that. And you'll see lots and lots of different attacks happening on both sides. And so even though I've showed you guys a couple variations that are almost identical, one change in move, it leads to a totally different situation. And so you'll never get bored playing the Sicilian. It's really, really fun. You can play thousands and thousands of games. I played a tournament in Spokane, Washington at a chess club there. And I think I played 5 or 6 games in that tournament, and every single one of them was a Sicilian defense, both as white and as black. Everyone knows the opening. It's really fun to play. And every single one of those 5 or 6 games with the Sicilian, it led to different lines and different variations. A couple times it was a dragon, a couple times it was a Najdorf, because I played white and they chose to play the Najdorf, right? You don't know what your opponent's going to choose to play. And so we went into those lines, and it was a really fun tournament, and all I did was play the Sicilian the whole entire time. And since I know this opening more than the rest, I had a really good score, and I won most of my games, and it was all because of my preparation. Like the course that you guys are taking right now from me, it's going to help you a lot when you get into games in the Sicilian and your opponent doesn't know the themes as well, and they don't know the lines as well, and you're going to win a lot of games because of this, especially in Blitz.